Hello once again. Hopefully today is treating you all right. We are going to get into elections and participation. And as usual, today we've got a question for you. And that one is, did you vote in the last election that took place here in Texas? And in case you're wondering, that was July 14th, 2020. Now I'm asking this question knowing that for the majority of folks out there, and I'm just looking at averages, right? No idea uh, who this applies to or not, right? I don't have access to that information. Um, but for most of y'all, the answer is probably no. And as for the why or why not, there's tons and tons of reasons why people give that. I didn't want to bother. It was too busy. I had work. I didn't even know there was an election. Maybe right, the elections that took place in July were runoff elections, and we'll look at the results of those here a little bit later. But um, most people don't care to vote in these things, right? Most people only vote if there is a presidential election going on. So all these other preliminary ones, the ones deciding who candidates are, deciding between close races, people don't get involved in those, and so you're kind of letting other people make these early decisions for you, and then you just kind of vote on what those other people decided for you, right? So there's a lot of reasons as to why people don't do it, but I want to really strongly, heavily encourage you to do get involved, get out and vote, because if you're not, somebody else is doing it for you, right? And I'm not saying somebody else is casting a ballot in your name, but if you don't vote, well, you're just kind of giving in to whatever the other people want, right? So you're handing over a lot of your political sovereignty, and that's one of the major things that we have in the United States that a lot of other countries don't have, and they don't have the ability to express this political freedom. So treat it well, because if you don't care about it, it is much easier for somebody to come along and take it away from you. Now, some of the major folks involved in these elections are going to be your political parties, and we looked at some of these already, so just kind of throwing it up there. The two major parties in the United States are the Republicans and the Democrats, and we also talked about the history of political parties in the United States, and I noted how there were five distinct periods, and how we talked about how at the end of each of these different periods there was some major thing that happened that kind of blew a hole into the party system. So in this second one, Jackson Democrats versus the Whigs, well, the question of slavery killed the Whig Party. They couldn't figure out how to respond to that particular issue. And then in 1928, right, this era was blown apart by the Great Depression and then the subsequent New Deal and then New Deal coalition, fourth era civil rights and Vietnam, and this huge distrust of government that was brewing blew apart the arrangement that was present at that point in time. Each of these eras is characterized by different political parties or different major ideas or concepts or issues that really helped to cleave the nation one way or the other. And again, those groups that are involved in this are going to be political parties. And I've got the definitions we've used before, right? So political party, group of citizens that generally have more or less the same views on a thing. You can think of political parties as like name tags, right? It's easy to clump a number of related ideas together. So, for example, if you think that the federal government needs to be very expansive, very big, very involved in people's lives, well, chances are you also think that something like increasing the social welfare safety net should be done, right? We need to have more regulations out there governing this, that, and the other. Or on the other side, if you think that state governments ought to have more power because you want to have power closer to the people, well, then you're going to see less of a need for the federal government to get involved in the economy, the federal government to get involved in a number of social issues, right? So to back up once more and kind of put this into that broader perspective, right? Parties are just a way to identify folks who generally think the same. Now, not all Republicans think alike, not all Democrats think alike. That's just not the case. But it's just an easy way to kind of lump people together. And these parties are after your vote. They want to kind of control the narrative. They want to control the laws or the regulations that are coming out of the federal government. In fact, that's but to do that, well, they've got to nominate people. They have to get folks elected. And we talked about the four major tasks that political parties in America today exercise. Much of our discussion today is going to focus in on this first one, running candidates for office. And that, of course, ties into that second one, formulating and promoting policy. But all four of these, or excuse me, numbers 2, 3, and 4 don't matter unless you've got candidates who not only run for office but win. So this first step, right, this first hurdle is huge for parties because again, if they don't accomplish it, if they're not successful, well, they're no longer sitting at the table. They don't have any power or authority or weight or anything like that. And in order to get that, well, you've got to run an election. You've got to not only run somebody in an election, but also win that election. So that's from the party side of it. Let's kind of think about this more broadly. Why should we even have elections here in the United States? What purpose do they serve? Here we see me and my son. This was taken maybe a year ago now, maybe two. I forget offhand. But he kind of came with me to vote. Got him his little sticker. He was super excited about that. But anyway, we have elections because this is our way, and by our, excuse me, I mean the citizens' way to express our views, get our thoughts out there. Other ways that we can kind of influence governments is that we could write a letter to our congressman or woman. We can write a letter to the governor, to the president. We can donate money to a party. We can go to a rally or a protest. We can get involved in all these other things. But most people don't. Right? Again, it's fine if that's not your thing. Not throwing shade here, but so having these elections, it's a very clear way for you and me, for citizens, to say, hey, this is what I think. This is what I believe. I kind of like what government is doing, or I don't like what government is doing. And so elections give us a way to not only express those ideas and kind of put our preferred policies sort of into action. Not only do that, but to kind of nominate or support people who are like-minded, right? So if we like what the president is doing, we can vote accordingly. If we don't like what the president or the governor or the mayor or whoever, if we don't like what they're doing, or if we do like what they're doing, right, we can again support that person or their opponents. Elections are how we take what is ours, our sovereign authority, our political power, and then we give it to somebody else to use, right? So Ted Cruz is the senator of Texas right now. So by voting for Cruz or against Cruz, right, no matter who we voted for, whoever wins gets that power. But this is our sort of transfer, a temporary transfer of our sovereign authority from you and me to Ted Cruz or to President Trump or to the mayor or to Pete Olson, our congressperson for the San Jacinto area, right? So it's again not permanent, right? We still have it, and if any of these elected officials start screwing around too much, well, we have the right to take them out of office and give it to somebody else. Excuse me. Another major reason to have elections is that it simply creates a winner and a loser, right? Somebody wins, somebody gets that sovereign authority, and everybody else doesn't. So again, whether or not you voted for President Trump doesn't matter, right? He is the recipient of the executive branch's political power because he is the person who won that election. Again, like him or not, doesn't matter. Voted for him or not, he's the one who won. Everybody else loses. So I can't, just say, you know what, today's the day. I'm going to be the governor of Texas. Or you know what, Ted Cruz, just go ahead and have a seat. I got this today. It's mine. We can't do that. That's not how this system works, right? We have known officials who get to exercise this power, and that is, in some ways, a check as well. We know who gets to make laws. We know who gets to enforce laws, things like that, right? So this is a way to kind of maintain the rule of law in the United States. Further, it helps to protect these three ideas, these things that we've talked about time and again this semester, the separation of power, balancing of powers, and federalism. Um, if, again, we like what government is doing, hey, great, let's send more people like that to power. So if we want to see more and more Democrats in charge because the general ideology that you agree with, okay, great, send more people there. If we don't, well, send Republicans, vote third party, something like that. Um, this second one, this balancing of power. We talked about the idea of divided government before, right? So we have the presidency, the House of Representatives, and the Senate. And the divided government is when no one party controls all three of those. So we can further balance power. So during the 2016 elections, the Republican Party won the presidency, the House of Representatives, and the Senate. So they had control of all three of those major sources of power in the federal government. In the midterm elections, the one that took place in 2018, a lot of folks were upset with where the nation was. They were upset with President Trump in particular and the Republicans generally. And so there was a large number of Democrats who won in the House of Representatives and who won in the Senate. So much so that the Republicans hold on to a majority in the Senate by just one or two votes, depending on how an independent votes. In the House of Representatives, well, Republicans lost a majority. Right? So we, the people, had a way to exercise our sovereign authority and say, you know what, we want to balance out this government. We don't want we don't want the president and the Congress to keep going down this path. So we are going to put up a roadblock to try to slow this thing down. Right? Again, I know I'm talking at very, very big picture here. You, again, may have loved what Republicans were doing or voted against them. Who knows, right? That's beside the point. I'm just kind of getting to more of these ideas behind it. And also federalism is very important because for the same exact reason, we can empower the state governments to push back against the federal government by electing people of the opposite party of whoever happens to be in charge. So all of these things are so very important to our way of life here in the United States, to our representative governments. So much so that I want to hit this last point again one more time. Right? It's the same one as our first bullet here. This is how we get involved in the most clear-cut, direct way. Granted, Jason Russell, can't determine who will be president or who will be the mayor or who will be my congressperson, right? I don't have that by myself. So my voice and your voice and the voice of all the other people around us, right? They're all pooled together. But it's still our voice. But if you want your voice to matter, you have to register to vote. Sorry, you have to vote, and in order to vote, you also have to register to vote. Typically, you have to have your application completed or at least postmarked 30 days prior to the election itself. To vote in the United States, also, you've got to be 18 years old. So to register to vote, you have to, rather, if you're not yet 18 when you register, you have to be 18 by the time the next election takes place. You cannot do this online, at least not in Texas. You have to mail this in, and the reason for that is that there has to be a signature on file, right? So there has to be your signature on file, and so that if ever there is any concern, if there's ever any discrepancy between, they think there might be an issue of voter fraud, for example. Well, the state of Texas has your signature on file, and they can match your signature with the one of the person who voted, right? So it's a very solid and very good safeguard against voter fraud. And this is particularly going to be interesting if issues with COVID keep coming up to prevent a lot of in-person balloting come November. So got that very, very fantastic safeguard in place. Now to register to vote, it is not that big a form, right? 3 very simple questions. Are you a citizen? Will you be 18? Is this a new or change application, right? All you need is some, your name, your phone number, and an address. That's it. This is not hard to do. It is so simple, and yet so many people don't do it. If you haven't done it, pause me now. Let me jump back a page. Go to this website, votetexas.gov. You can print out a form. You can even go to a couple different county offices. Be sure to check their hours, right? Everything's weird now with the virus. But check those things out. So simple. Fill out that form. Now, I do want to point out this last statement down here. I'll highlight it for you. Don't lie on this form. This is a federal form, and if you lie on it, you are liable for $2,000 fine, up to 180 days in prison. That being said, it's so simple. Fill it out. Just make sure that you do it appropriately and do it correctly. Now, to register to vote again. So the elections that we had that took place in July, on July 14th. In order to have registered, right, you have to have everything turned in 30 days prior to the election. So if you wanted to have voted in the July 14th election, you had to be 18 by that point in time, but you had to have everything submitted or at least postmarked by June 15th. So for the upcoming election, the one in November, on November 3rd, you've got to have your stuff submitted by October 5th. So it's mid-July. You still got a few months, but don't forget. Just do it now. Pause me. Just do it now. Be so simple. Don't forget to register to vote. Hey guys, please register to vote. You got to register. Don't forget to register to vote. Okay, last time. So when we get into more particulars, right, we're going to get into the types of elections at this point. We've got three major types. We have primary or caucus, a runoff primary, and then a general election. And there's also a few special types of elections, and we'll look at those special ones here in a little bit. But those three special types are initiative, referendum, and recall. First off, we'll take a look at the primary election. Now, to be clear, this is a party-only thing. So the Democrats have their primaries. The Republicans have their primaries. The Libertarian Party have their own primaries. These are all separate and distinct things. So the Democratic primary is just with the Democratic folks. The Republican primary, just with the Republican folks. Same thing with Green Party, Libertarian Party, Socialist Party. All these different ones are unique, right? They're independent. And a primary is used to determine who a candidate will be. So you've got all the Democrats saying, okay, folks, let's get together. Let's try to figure out who do we want to be our presidential candidate, our gubernatorial candidate, right? Whatever it is, right? So they're deciding for each and every one of the offices who among them will be the person to run under that party's banner. These can be open or closed. An open primary is one where any registered voter can vote. So if you are a registered Republican, for example, and also to become a registered member of a party, right? Just another little form you got to fill out. Sometimes it's just a box you have to check, so super easy thing to do. But anyway, if you are a registered Republican and the Democratic Party is holding an open primary, you as a registered Republican can go and vote in that Democratic primary. So an open primary is one that is open to anybody, just so long as you are registered. A closed primary, on the other hand, is one where you, in order to vote in a party's closed primary, you have to be a registered member of that party's primary. So to vote in the Democratic primary, if it's closed in a given state, well, you've got to be a registered Democrat. To vote in the Republican closed primary, you've got to be a Republican registered voter. Other states, and Texas is among them, have what's known as a semi-open primary, right? So it's got a little of both of these things. So to vote in a primary in Texas, you have to be registered, and you have to be a registered member of a certain party. So the Republican Party, right? If you want to vote in Texas's Republican primary, you have to be a registered Republican to do it. Democratic primary, you've got to be a registered Democrat to do it. But, and here's where the open part comes in, but you can register for a party or change your affiliation to a party on the day of the actual primary. So you can, sorry, my mistake. You can show up to the polling station, right, and say, hey, I am a registered Republican and I would like to vote in the Democratic primary. They'll hand you a little form, you sign it, and boom, right after that, you're now a registered member of the Democratic Party and you can vote in that Democratic primary. So very, very simple to become a member of one party or the other, and then vote in either of those primaries, right? Whichever one that you see fit. And again, this is kind of unique to Texas. A few states have this, not a lot, but that's because we are this a semi-open primary. Now, if you register for as a member of the Republican Party, when it's come election day, right, the November election, there's no limit saying that you must vote only Republican, right? You can vote for whoever you want, right? So the registering for one party or the other, kind of think of it as RSVPing to a party, right? So now the Republican Party says, okay, we know that these people are going to show up to the game, sorry, mixing metaphors. They're going to show up to the party. And there's no cost. There's no penalty for changing your affiliation whatsoever. Super easy to do here in Texas, right? So that is the primary election. The other one of these early types is a caucus. And now caucuses are going to be used to do the exact same thing, right? Determine who will run for a particular party, for the president, for the governor, for the Senate, for the mayor, whatever. But a caucus has a much longer process involved. So the day of a caucus, somebody from every single person who's running for an office, right? So every single individual. So if, let's say that there's 10 people running to become Iowa's governor, right? So that means that all 10 of those candidates or one of their representatives will show up at every single caucus sites, and they'll all give speeches saying, hey, person number 1, you vote for me, here's what I'm going to do. Person number 3, a vote for me is da 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 da. Person number 10, hey, great, vote for me, I'm the best person, blah 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 blah. Oh, and now they move on to the state senators, and then the United States federal senators, and then the presidential, right? So it's a very long process, and then everybody who's there, they kind of ballot, right? They take a vote. Some places it is literally you go to different corners of the room if you support person A or person B. And then they select the delegates, and the delegates are the ones who will go on to a state convention later on in life. So kind of we'll just move past that. And then after that, then they get down to business and they say, okay, we the members of the Iowa Democratic Caucus, we want to see these policies put in place. We want to see the Democratic Party working to accomplish this, that, and the other, or the Republicans to accomplish this, that, or the other, right? So they're really putting their ideas in place. So here in the caucus setup, we see a very clear way for citizens to very clearly express what they think, what they want to see happen, and get their voices heard by these parties. That being said, not a whole lot of people have an entire day, because these are usually on a weekday, right? To sit around and go to these caucuses, and even if they do have the day, even less people are interested in doing this. So the caucus, the benefit here is that you have a lot more individuals who are able to weigh in, and really you can maybe sway other people, and if somebody shows up on the fence, well, they can listen to the speeches and get a lot of information about a candidate just simply by being there. But it does take a lot longer as opposed to a primary where you just show up, you get a ballot, you go off to a booth, you punch a few names, and you hand it back. You're in and out in 10 minutes. It's much faster. So primaries tend to have a higher percentage of people turning out. Caucuses, though, they take longer, have fewer turnout, but the people that do turn out are a lot more involved in this. So because of that, right, about 2/3 of the states use primaries just because it's simpler, whereas about 1/3 rely on the caucus. Now, these primaries and caucuses, they don't always yield a winner. So we'll get into the runoff primaries here in just a moment.